sweep through your life and upend everything. And so I saw that as a connecting thread that I could tie throughout all four of these short novels.
Of the four, surprisingly for a horror writer, Loaded is the most frightening because it's the most plausible.
Yeah, it has no supernatural element.
Is it difficult to get inside the head of Randall Kellaway and tell the story from his point of view?
Right, so Loaded is the story of a man who stops a mass shooting, apparently, and then and it becomes an instant sort of national hero to the gun rights movement. But then under the hot glare of the media lights, his story starts to come apart, and his sanity comes apart with it. And I wrote a book that was about a kind of vampire, that was Nosferatu. And I wrote a story about the devil, that was Horns. And I wrote a whole book of ghost stories. But, you're always trying to think, what can I write about that's really scary? And probably the scariest thing I can think of is the white American male with a gun. And I've thought a lot about the gun culture of America and about gun violence, especially ever since 2013, when a disturbed young man named Adam Lanza walked into the Sandy Hook Elementary School and blew away over 20 little kids. That's happened over here too in Great Britain, when a disturbed man walked into school in Dunblane and blasted a bunch of kids, and the government responded. They took swift action, and that's never happened since. There was a similar shooting in Australia, and the government took swift, decisive action. That doesn't happen there anymore. In America, we're up to our eyeballs in blood, and so we're so up to where the blood has come so high you can't even see us shrugging anymore. They're just, and I've had arguments about guns online. It's been argued about in news magazines. It's argued about on the evening cable shows by these odious mouth breathers, And I did have a moment of revelation about a year and a half ago when I thought, why am I doing it? Why am I arguing with people online? That's not my job. It's not my job to deliver lectures, or do public policy prescriptions. I write stories. Why don't I do that? So I wrote a story, and if I did my job right, it's an entertainment. And no matter where you stand on this issue, you'll have fun. Hopefully, if I did my job right, you'll remain stapled to the page, and you'll keep going, and you'll be excited to find out what happens next. You'll feel, dread and suspense. But along the way, and I don't believe it preaches. It doesn't come up with, it doesn't say this is what we should do. What it does do, though, is it tries to explore every facet of gun violence in America, not just the mass shooting, but the epidemic of young unarmed black males who have been, blasted by law enforcement, and there were no repercussions whatsoever. Or it examines the case of the guy, the neighborhood guy who seems nice, works 40 hours a week, has a backyard barbecue on Sunday mornings for the neighbors, But on Saturday night, he has a couple drinks and says some hurtful things to the wife, and she says, I'm taking the kids and I'm going to my sister's. And he goes to the closet and gets out the gun, and he says, you ever leave me, I'll kill you, and I'll kill them. And that scene is playing out in a household somewhere in America every single night, somewhere, and there's an epidemic of suicide among middle-aged white guys by way of the gun, and that's where most of the gun deaths come from. You say, if we took all the guns away, they'd still find some way to kill themselves. Actually, it's not true. It's just not true. We know because for years in the United Kingdom, all the ovens were gas, and people would kill themselves by turning on the gas and sticking their head in the oven. That's where the phrase head in the oven comes from. But then in the 1970s, ovens became electric in the United Kingdom, and the entire suicide rate plummeted. As soon as you couldn't kill yourself painlessly on an impulse, you didn't do it anymore. You had time to rethink. And the gun is an instant off switch that you don't have to think. You don't have to think it's going to be painful and just get it over with. So there's all that, and I looked at all that, and it's not like at the end of it I came up with any grand solution to gun violence, you know. But that's not my job. My job is just to tell a story and give people a new way to look at something.
Okay. You include a lot of pop culture and music in your work. There must be a certain balance between setting the scene and making your work dated.
Yeah.
How do you approach that?
Well, I don't really think about it that much. That's why I'm struggling. That's why I'm struggling to give it an answer. I mean, I'm going to give you an answer. I've never really thought about it that much. I mean, in Heart-Shaped Box, you know, Jude broods over his MySpace page. Actually, I think that's even cooler now. Like, nothing, like now, the fact that it makes him seem even more out of touch, and I kind of love that. And, you know, I mean, I think you just try to tell the best story you can in this moment, and, you know, I mean, if people still reading it 20, 30 years later, wow, how lucky have you been? You know, that's unbelievable, but you can't worry about that. All you can do is say, you know, I'm writing for this moment, and hopefully people will respond and be excited and enjoy it, you know, and I live to fight another day.
You've mentioned online a couple of times. You've always been a very visible person online from the days.
I thought you were going to say a chronic masturbator. Wow, dude, I didn't know we were going there. That's awesome.
From the days of the bulletin boards and places like Shutdowns to now where you're on Twitter. Do you think it's important to be part of the online world, or is it a distraction, or? I'm not sure it's been all that good for us, actually. Really, I mean, I think there's some really wonderful things about the online world and about social media, but I'm not sure. I mean, look, you know, smoking cigarettes definitely sharpens your ability to problem solve. You know, also gives you cancer. You know, I mean, a lot of things have some pros, but when you take an honest look at the cons, it's outweighed somewhat. And I'm not saying that social media is cigarettes. It's clearly, though, been something of a cancer for democracy. You know, in the sense of hostile foreign powers have been able to pour acid on social divides. You know, it's clear that a lot of hatreds, you know, that Russian trolls squirted gasoline all over a whole set of social fires in America, and it wasn't healthy for the democracy. You know, and it may turn out that was also true about Brexit. I don't know, you know, and it's funny how quickly a lot of social networks have turned into safe spaces for Nazis. You know, I mean, that's crazy. You know, I mean, but there's, you know, my big thing about social media. I wrote a story in Strange Weather, that story Aloft, about the guy who jumps out of the plane and lands on his island of cloud. Sometimes I think we're all living on our islands of cloud, isolated from each other. You know, that's a story about the separation between the real world, the factual world, and the world of projection and imagination. I mean, think about the people we know online, the friends you've made online. How much do you really know about them? Isn't it honestly like about 10% fact and 90% projection? You know, you're sort of projecting your hopes, beliefs, you know, and you know, possibilities onto them. I do think that the era of connection has left people counterintuitively very isolated, and I think that has to be, you know, that you have to look at that as being a bit troubling.